Hello, I'm Julian Bright of Informa. We're here at LTE Asia in Hong Kong, and I'm with Stephen Weiss, who is Managing Director of RBS's telecoms practice in Asia. Stephen, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. What are you going to talk about at the conference here? You're presenting, I think, later this afternoon.
Well, I think originally, from Informa, the subject matter was really consideration of financing of LTE. And I think that morphed more into what is the investment case for LTE. And that really morphed more into who is going to deploy it, when, and why. Because it will happen. That's the conclusion that we have, is that it will happen. But there will be different motivations for people to try and deploy early or be able to have the option to wait a little bit.
How do you view the prospects for LTE, for example, when you look at previous generations of technology, such as WCDMA?
Yeah. WCDMA was really an investment bust. I mean, I don't think anybody has gotten their money out of it. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was leading demand. It was a technology that was looking for demand to fill the pipe. And it was brand new, and nobody really knew what to do. They didn't know how to sell it. The devices were immature. They didn't know what strategy would work best, a walled garden approach or a dumb pipe approach.
Yes.
And so there was a lot of, testing, trial and error to see what would happen. And I think the big difference now is that you have the demand is really going to pull LTE along. You have a technology that's very, very suited for demand. And you know how now have people who understand how to use mobile data and understand mobile internet and want to use it, and they've really grown into the technology, and now the technology has to advance in order to allow for the full realization of that demand.
Yes. And what about, we're seeing some quite early deployments in 2010 from a number of operators.
Right.
What is really driving that? You talked about demand, but also there are other factors influencing their choice to move early with the technology.
Right. I think what you'll see is that, especially in developed markets, some of the CDMA players will move more quickly. And I think that's more a concern that although they're in a very good technology, that it may be subscale and that maybe the vendors are not going to support some of the roadmap that CDMA has defined going forward. So I think you'll see them move first. You'll see 2G players, people who didn't get 3G licenses moving. And I think you'll also see a number of WiMAX players moving, because although WiMAX, again, is a nice technology, why stay in a technology that's really a niche when you could be part of a much, much bigger ecosystem? And I think that's really the main point, is that the whole competitive dynamic is going to change, because you're going to suddenly give a new lease on life to some of these more niche technologies and to some of the CDMA players. And so suddenly everybody will be on equal footing. Yeah. So in some markets where you have, WCDMA competing against CDMA, now they'll be equal. And, it's going to really become a real marketing game.
And what about the fact that operators are being asked to make another round of investments here in another generation of technology? Is this a large burden on their CapEx resources? What does LTE represent in terms of investment?
Yeah, it doesn't appear that CapEx is going to be huge, and of course you can do smart build out. And I think one of the other things that's changed since WCDMA is people are much more used to the idea of sharing infrastructure and sharing networks.
Yes.
So they're going to be able to be very smart about it. And that's, again, one of the lessons I think we've learned from WCDMA and UMTS.
And the deployment pattern will be what? The initial deployment in hotspots and areas, high usage areas, or?
That seems to be, seems to be what in the conference here, what the conclusion is, that a smart build out will be done.
Yeah.
And of course, with some of the CDMA players or WiMAX players or 2G players, it may be a little bit more aggressive than the HSPA plus players.
Where do you think the market in Asia will be in terms of this rollout? Will it be at the forefront along with some other parts of the world? Are Asian operators really gearing up to move quickly on this?
Well, in Asia, you really have a bifurcated market. You have some of the most developed internet-savvy people in the world in Japan and Korea.
Yeah.
And then you have emerging markets. And emerging markets are going to be some of the later markets.
Yeah.
To adopt this, and even some of the sort of medium markets like Malaysia, for instance, or Taiwan, I would think that given that all the players are HSPA plus, that they might just carry along with that for a while. That there may not be the biggest advantage to being a first mover.
Yeah.
So I think that that you'll see Japan, Korea. Even China, places where there are kind of niche technologies that people will move quickly. And in emerging markets, here in Asia, we still have major countries like India that don't have a 3G license.
Yes.
Now, I think one of the interesting things in some of these markets is, do they need it? Or can they start refarming some of their spectrum and go straight to LTE?
Yes.
That could be, I think that's a very
option,
interesting, dynamic at play now.
Yeah. So. Do you see any issues with device availability as we saw with 3G, or is that problem not going to arise this time around?
Well, I think because this unifies all technologies, and the fact that you have 3GPP and 3GPP2, working together to try and do it, I think you're going to see a much more accelerated rolling out of devices. Yeah. This is not going to be a really big, I don't think it's a huge technological jump. Yeah. I think it's a much easier technological transformation than just than it was with 3G.
Yeah.